Hey, what's up, everybody? Good morning, good evening, or afternoon, whatever time of day you're deciding to watch this video. In this video, we're going to finish up our initial discussion on temperature that we started in our lecture. And I want to give a slight disclaimer. I'm doing a little bit of laundry right now, so if you hear sort of the dryer pumping around, I'm trying to do my AirPods so that it's not as picked up on, but if it does get picked up, I apologize. Okay, so before we get started, I want you to recall where we finished when we were talking about temperature. First, like, what is it? What are the units we use to measure it? How do we measure it, right? And recall that we went over a few different types of thermometers, perhaps ones that you're familiar with from your day-to-day life, versus ones that we use in the in data and when we're doing research or in the field at our automated stations. And so we're kind of like finish up a bit of that discussion today, learn about how we measure temperature throughout the air column and directly measure temperature throughout the air column. And I want you to try to hypothesize what is done. So what do you think we would use as scientists to do that? Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with that. All right, so we looked at a few different weather stations, and we may have noticed that the temperature, the thermometers, excuse me, were not right at the surface, right? We may have noticed that they're actually a bit above ground level. And there's a very distinct reason for that. So we measure temperature about 2 meters or so, 2.5 meters, about 6 feet above the ground at the official level. And why do you think that might be? And here's a hand-drawn graph to kind of help with your thought process with this. There's temperature on our x-axis, our left to right axis, and then altitude in feet on our left and meters on our right, for those who think in both. And these different lines, the different colored lines, indicate temperatures at different times. And of course, this is very idealized, very, very simplified, and just a very general sort of idea here. And I want you to observe the patterns here, right? All of science is pattern recognition. So when we're looking at temperature at, say, 6 a.m., notice that the temperature closer to the ground, like imagine you were like standing right here. Let's see. Oh gosh. Imagine that you are, say, like standing right here. Say you're over 6 feet tall. So this temperature, what we call inversion, say in the morning time, we would tend to observe this cooler temperature at the surface, and it kind of like all evens out as you go further up, like the height of your body, right? Whereas the further in the day we go, and imagine like a really nice, bright, sunny day. That's a terrible looking sun, but a sunny looking day, and the sun then heats up the surface much more, or the surface layer here was going to be much, much, much warmer than the ambient temperature that you're feeling, say at like chest level. So, and to think about that too, think about if you've ever walked on, say, concrete or asphalt and barefoot, and maybe you've had to like kind of run a little bit if it's been like a really sunny day, because the concrete absorbs a lot of that energy, the sun's energy, and it heats it up much faster than it does the air around it. So the main reason why we take measurements from this height is to decrease the influence of whatever surface material is there. So try to, if there's grass or concrete or asphalt or rocks, whatever there is, we try to like alleviate that influence. What we also made note of in lecture is that the instrument has to be in some sort of sheltered instrument, or some sort of shelter, generally white in color, so that it doesn't absorb any sort of incoming solar radiation. And we also want it to have kind of sort of slots so that the air can move freely through that sheltered instrument. So we basically want to try and remove as much influence or bias from the readings that we are getting, just to make sure that we're actually measuring the correct temperature. And again, just to remind ourselves, I know we had a poll question about this if you were in person, indicating the different units that we use for temperature, right? So a few of us thought that Kelvin was not a unit of measurement for temperature, but then we learned, or we're learning now, that Kelvin is indeed a unit of measurement for temperature, mainly used in scientific calculations. And I really like this image here because it nicely compares the equivalent temperature of each unit. So say 212 Fahrenheit is the same as 100 degrees Celsius is the same as 373.15 degrees Kelvin. We're mainly going to be working in Celsius and Fahrenheit. So don't worry too much about Kelvin, just know that it is simply a unit that we use in science. Unless you're like an earth science major or environmental science major, then you'll probably utilize Kelvin in your practice. And I will also just mention that Celsius and Fahrenheit only intersect at one point where they are the same, and that is at -40. So -40 degrees Celsius and -40 degrees Kelvin is the same. And really the only times that we see that in nature in the United States is in the dead of winter, generally in the middle US or upper Midwest. And sometimes that can be without wind chill, which is very, very unpleasant. If you've never experienced it, it's not fun. And then there's just a couple of temperature conversions here. We're going to work on these in lab. We're going to kind of hand math some conversions. It's not super duper complicated. I think you promise it's a plug and play sort of thing. We'll walk you through it step by step. But the textbook that I use also has these little tables here to kind of compare these various temperatures to each other. Okay, so now moving into how do we take upper air measurements? And this is not just for temperature. So how do you think we do that? Take a thought, take a pause. If you thought balloons, you'd be right. But the very specific balloons, not like happy birthday balloons, but they are very specific, like weather balloons. Notice how large they are, especially over here on the left-hand side. You can kind of see me back in my college days, still rocking the messy buns, but see how large it is here. So these are launched twice daily, hopefully, usually, from various locations around the world. Unfortunately, and we'll see this in a slide coming up here, the amount of balloon launches that we've been able to do in the past 2 years has decreased quite significantly thanks to funding cuts from the current presidential administration. So that is a big bummer. So what we call these radiosondes. So just a fancy word, I guess, for weather balloon. And we launch them, again, twice a day, but at the same time, everywhere around the world. And these launches are in Zulu time. So Zulu time is just universal standard time, if you've ever worked with that before. So we're going to say 0Z and 12Z, but just know that that is 5 a.m. and 5 p.m. our time. But if we were, say, in Iowa, again, where I'm from, that would be 7 a.m. and 7 p.m., right? Because 5 a.m. for us is 7 a.m. For them. And we do this so that everything is uniform as we can be, right? And there are launches that occur sometimes at different times of the day. Usually if there's like a severe weather event going on in the Midwest, they'll do some launches around like the storm cells just to get the feel for what the environment, or to visually see what the environment looks like at that time, see how volatile it is, see how unstable it is, so that we can more accurately be able to forecast and warn people in those areas. Anyway, so looking at this cute little balloon and like orange like parachute looking thing on it, notice this little white box on the bottom. That is what holds the instrumentation. So this holds instruments that measure temperature, dew point. Just know that dew point is moisture content. So how much moisture is the air holding right now? and wind speed and direction as a function of height. So as that balloon goes up, 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 and is taken away by the wind, sometimes they go, woo, they go really far off to the left or right, or north to south. But sometimes if it's not very windy, it almost goes straight up. And a lot of information can be determined from these soundings. So this is a very generic schematic of what a sounding can look like, one from your textbook. And so the red line, oh, let me just explain it a little bit. So temperature, once again, is on our x-axis, and altitude, again, is on our y-axis, this time in kilometers. These little dotted lines here are layers of pressure levels that are the sort of average pressure levels for these various altitudes. These levels vary from location to location. We'll talk about why that is later on. But basically, we see this red line, and I'm so sorry, by the way, if you're colorblind. A lot of graphs that are made often use red and green, so I apologize. So the right line, which is red, is temperature, and the green line, which is dew point temperature, and that one's here on the left. So we can observe here that temperature goes down as we go up in height, and this is something that we would expect, right? Temperature decreases as we go up, but the dew point temperature is much more kind of erratic. There's a lot more kind of movement there. And then usually wind speed and direction are over here on the right-hand side in the form of what we call wind barbs. And in the next lecture, you will learn what wind barbs are and what exactly they mean. But the idea is pretty simple. It's like the more wind barbs, the faster the wind. So also what we can tell, and we'll learn again this more in finer detail later on, but the closer that temperature and dew point are together, the more moist the air column is, like at that level. So we would say that this column of the air is much more moist than down here at the surface for this particular schematic. And that can tell us, again, things like, could it be cloudy? Is there a cloud layer up there, or down at the surface? Things like that. So what we do in the real world is when we have these balloon launches, this here is a sounding from Oakland Airport, which is here. What we do is we take all of this data and we put it into software to make upper level maps. So atmospheric scientists are always trying to see what is going on in the atmosphere. So when we're looking at upper levels, so really, really high above our head, this is 300 millibars, think about like 36,000-ish feet, so where planes fly. We want to know where the jet stream is. There's a lot of different things we can tell from the jet stream. Also, pilots like to know where a jet stream is so that you can pop on in there and allow your aircraft to fly faster. Think about like if you're ever walking when it's really windy and you're walking with the wind behind you, it's kind of like pushing you forward. Whereas if you're walking with the wind at your face, it's almost like it's pushing you back. Same thing for aircraft, but just on a much, much, much grander scale. To a point where if you've ever like flown from, say, San Francisco or the West Coast over to Asia, your flight to Asia is likely several hours longer than your flight from Asia back to the US, if you ever experienced that. So lots of, again, technical things here. One thing to point out is down here at the bottom, notice again how our two little red and green lines, or our right line is temperature, left line is dew point temperature, are really, really close together. That's indicating our cute little marine layer or our fog layer. And then notice how we have this increase in temperature with height. That's called temperature inversion. Mentioned that word a little earlier. And this just indicates a really, really super ultra mega stable layer in our area. So again, where are these balloons launched? This is from a website called the University of Wyoming. They used to showcase a lot of really beautiful stuff. We actually won't use this website a whole ton, but I used it a lot in my undergrad. And then this is from the Storm Prediction Center website. And so all these blue stars are where balloon launches happened on the 28th of August, and this was in 2025. This maybe looks a little bit different today. Again, we've seen much less in terms of balloon launches lately, unfortunately. And this was at 12 UTC, so this was at 5 p.m. our time. Okay, so that's all that we're going to cover for now in terms of temperature. It's a variable we're going to talk about a lot in this class. As you can imagine, temperature differences are key to how things move around in our atmosphere and how we'll and can drive severe weather. Um, Again, we'll learn all about why and how that is as we get to it. So thank you so much for watching, and let me know if you have any questions. All right, bye.